Born into a world where my last name opens more doors than I care to walk through, you could say I had it all laid out for me. My dad's the big boss of a company you've probably seen tick across the stock exchange screen more times than you've cursed the morning alarm. Yes, that kind of rich. But if you're expecting tales of a golden girl, draped in designer and sipping champagne for breakfast, you've got the wrong story. Me? I've always kept it real, feet firmly on the ground. Money's nice, sure, but it's not everything. I chose a different path, one that's led me to places money can't buy and experiences no gold card can fetch. Charity work, helping those in need, and living a life that's, well, ordinary. That's me, Jessica. Not the heiress, just Jessica. So, I was stuck in one of those typical evenings where my friend Sarah decided we all needed to get out more. We ended up at this dive bar downtown, the kind where the beer's cheap and the lights are dim enough to hide your regrets. Sarah was all hyped up, going on about some guy she met online. "You've gotta meet him, Jess. He's totally your type," she kept saying. My type? Since when did she decide she knew my type? Anyway, we're there, and in walks this guy. Not Sarah's online prince, but another dude, Alex. He was there with some friends, looking as out of place as a cat at a dog show. He wasn't dressed to impress, just a simple tee, jeans, and this easy smile that kind of lit up the room. We got to talking, and it was easy. Like, really easy. He worked some manager job at a place I'd never heard of, nothing fancy, but he talked about it with this passion that was kinda infectious. "You really dig your job, huh?" I remember asking, sipping on my third beer. "Absolutely," Alex shot back, leaning in. "Every day's a challenge. But hey, I'm not here to bore you with work talk. What about you?" Sarah mentioned charity work. I shrugged, trying to downplay it. "Yes, a bit of this and that. Just trying to do my bit, you know?" "That's cool. Really cool," he said, and I could tell he meant it. Not in a trying to impress you sort of way, but genuinely. The night rolled on, our group mingling, but Alex and I kind of stuck together, chatting about everything and nothing. It was refreshing, talking to someone who wasn't trying to sell me on some investment or brag about their latest acquisition. As the night was winding down, Alex got this look in his eye, like he was working up to something. "Hey, Jessica, I know this is kind of forward, but would you want to grab dinner with me sometime? Just us?" I remember feeling this mix of surprise and excitement. "Sure," I said, trying to sound cool about it. "I'd like that." On the way home, Sarah was all giggles and "I told you so's." I just smiled, thinking about the evening. Alex was a breath of fresh air in my often too stale world. Little did I know how much things were about to change. It wasn't long before going out turned into hanging out at each other's places, which, let's be real, mostly meant my cozy apartment because Alex's roommates were a circus and a half. One evening, sprawled on the couch after devouring what might be the world's most average takeout pizza, Alex turned to me, his eyes serious, but his tone light. "Jessica, how do you feel about making this a more permanent arrangement?" he asked, crumbs still clinging to the corner of his mouth. I raised an eyebrow. "You proposing we split a Netflix account or something more along the lines of a lease?" He chuckled, brushing off the crumbs. "Well, I was thinking more like a life together. But hey, we can start with Netflix." The simplicity of it, the straightforwardness, no grand gestures or dramatic backdrops, just us, in our element. It felt right. "Alex, if you're asking what I think you're asking. Yes. 1,000 times, yes." And just like that, with the aroma of cheap pizza as our witness, we decided to tie the knot. It was swift, sure, but when you know, you know. Telling our families was the next hurdle. My folks, well, they've always been about the "as long as you're happy" mantra, but this was putting it to the test. Dad, with his business empire, and Mom, the socialite, they had visions of me settling down with someone more in our circle. I broke the news over dinner, the fancy kind, where you're not sure which fork to use for the salad. "Mom, Dad, I'm getting married to Alex," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Dad paused, fork midair. "Alex? The manager chap? Well, that's quick." Mom simply smiled, a bit too tightly. "Dear, are you sure? This is rather sudden, isn't it?" But I was firm. "Yes, I'm sure. He's amazing, and we're really happy together." Their skepticism was palpable, but so was their love. "Well, if he makes you happy, darling," Mom conceded, and Dad nodded in agreement. Alex's folks were a whole different ball game. We went over to their place, a cozy little house that seemed always to smell like fresh cookies, or something equally comforting. Judy and Martin, they were as down-to-earth as they come, and they welcomed me like I'd always been a part of the family. "Alex tells us you're setting a date?" Martin asked, passing me a plate of those infamous cookies. "Yes, we're thinking sooner rather than later. Small ceremony, nothing fancy," I replied, trying to gauge their reaction. Judy beamed. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. We're just thrilled for you both." Their warmth was enveloping, a stark contrast to the cautious optimism of my own parents. It was clear, right from the get-go, that our worlds were different, but the common ground was the genuine happiness for me and Alex. Planning the wedding, we were on the same page: keep it simple, keep it us. A small ceremony, close friends and family, and an open bar because, as Alex put it, if we're doing this, we're making sure everyone's having a good time. And that's how it went down. A swift engagement, not because we were rushing, but because everything just clicked into place. Amid the whirlwind, there were quiet moments, looks shared between us that said, "We're doing the right thing." And we really were. Living with Alex started off as everything I'd hoped for and more. We were like two peas in a pod, making our little corner of the world in that cozy, modern apartment I had rented. It was ours, filled with love, laughter, and a ton of takeout containers, because, let's face it, neither of us were winning any awards in the kitchen. It wasn't long before I started noticing how Alex's parents, Judy and Martin, had this way of dropping hints about things they liked or needed whenever they came over. At first, it was subtle, almost cute. "Oh, Jessica, that's a lovely coffee maker. Must make mornings a breeze," Judy would say, eyeing our shiny new appliance with a gleam in her eye. Or Martin, "This sofa is just divine. Our old one's been giving me a right pain in the back, you know." Wanting to be the good daughter-in-law, I'd surprise them with gifts here and there. A coffee maker for Judy, a comfortable new sofa for their living room, and so on. Their initial reactions were always the same, a mix of surprise and a little bit of guilt. "Oh, Jessica, you shouldn't have. This is too much," Judy would exclaim, her hands fluttering to her chest. But, you know, humans are funny creatures. Give them an inch, and they'll take a mile. Those initial protests faded away, replaced by a growing list of subtle hints that were about as subtle as a brick through a window. "Dinner at your folks' place was lovely, dear. Did you see that new TV they have? Crystal clear. Ours is practically ancient." Alex would relay his parents' latest comments, oblivious to the change in their tone. One evening, after I'd just dropped a not-so-small fortune on a fancy new TV for them, Alex and I were curled up on the couch, my head resting in his lap. "They really loved the TV, babe. You're amazing, you know that," he said, his fingers running through my hair. I sighed, the weight of their expectations starting to press down on me. "Alex, do they expect us to keep doing this? It's getting a bit much, don't you think?" He paused, his hand stopping mid-stroke. "What do you mean? They're just happy, that's all." "Happy or taking advantage?" I pushed back, sitting up to look at him. "It feels like we're their personal shopping service." Alex was taken aback, his brow furrowing. "They're not like that, Jess. They're just not used to nice things, that's all." "But where does it end, Alex?" "It's like they've got a taste for it now, and they're not looking back," I argued, frustration creeping into my voice. The conversation ended with an uneasy truce, but it was clear we were on different pages. Judy and Martin's gratitude had morphed into entitlement, and it was putting a strain on us, on me. I loved Alex, but I wasn't about to become a bottomless ATM for his parents. When my dad's company hit the skids, it felt like the rug was yanked out from under my feet. That cushy life? Poof, gone. And with it, the whole dynamic of my relationship took a nosedive. The shift wasn't gradual, it was like flipping a switch from daylight to darkness. I had to break the news to Alex and his folks, and let me tell you, that was a conversation I'd been dreading. Listen up, things are gonna get tight. Dad's company's tanking, and well, we're in for a rough ride, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tremor was there, betraying my nerves. Alex's reaction was a gut punch. You're kidding me, right? What do you mean things are gonna get tight? You're telling me we can't live like we used to because of your dad's mess? His words were like ice, and for a second, I wished the floor would swallow me whole. Judy and Martin's faces were no better, their disappointment barely masked. This is quite the situation you put us in, Jessica, Martin added, his tone dripping with reproach. And just like that, the warmth and camaraderie we once shared evaporated, replaced by this cold expectation that somehow, I was to blame for my family's financial downturn. Moving in with them was hell dressed up as a temporary solution. Our once independent life got swapped for a guest room that felt more like a cell in the house of the two people who clearly saw us as a nuisance. The atmosphere was charged with tension, every day a reminder that I'd somehow failed them. We're cutting back on everything because of this, Judy would remind me, her voice sharp, as she served dinner that was a far cry from the lavish meals we used to enjoy. And Martin, always with a comment on saving costs. Make sure those lights are off. We're not running a charity here. But Alex, he was the hardest to bear. The man I married seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who saw me as a letdown. Can't you do something? Talk to your dad? It's like you don't even care we're living like this. He'd snap, anger flaring over the smallest things. Our conversations, once easy and filled with future plans, now were minefields. Every word I said was a potential trigger for another outburst. I thought marrying you meant security, not this struggle, he'd throw at me during arguments, his words slicing through me. It was clear we weren't just dealing with financial stress. This was a test of our relationship, a revelation of true colors under pressure. I was stuck in the middle, battling the disillusionment from my husband and his parents, while grappling with my own sense of failure. Judy's birthday dinner was supposed to be this cozy family thing at some upscale restaurant, a break from the constant tension. But it turned into the showdown of a lifetime. I should have seen it coming, the way things had been going at their place. We're all sitting there, menu in hand, and I'm trying to keep the peace, just blend into the background. That plan got torpedoed the second orders started flying. Alex, with this grin that made my skin crawl, goes, "Let's get the steak and the lobster for us," and he throws a look my way, 1 part smug, 2 parts cruel. Jessica can do with the soup of the day. Gotta save where we can, right? They all laugh like it's the best joke they've heard in ages. Judy adds her 2 cents. Absolutely, can't have Jessica overspending now, can we? I felt this flush of heat, not embarrassment, but pure fury. Really? Soup? What's this, some kind of sick joke? I snapped back, my voice sharper than I intended. Oh, come on, Jessica. It's just a bit of fun, Alex said, that smirk still plastered on his face. That's when I lost it. Fun? This is your idea of fun? When the chips are down, you just show how petty you really are. I can't believe I fell for your act. You could hear a pin drop. The whole restaurant was watching now, the awkwardness off the charts. I didn't sit back down. Keep your fancy dishes and your pathetic jokes. I'm out, I said, standing up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. The noise echoed, turning more heads our way. Alex reached out, trying to play the peacemaker. Jessica, don't. Let's not make this a scene. A scene? You think I care about making a scene after that stunt? This is about respect, something you clearly have none of. I yanked my arm free and made for the exit, the weight of their stares on my back. Stepping out into the night felt like breaking out of prison. My phone was blowing up, Alex no doubt, trying to do damage control. I ignored it, my mind made up. I drove back to their place, a storm of emotions brewing inside. How had things gone so sour? Alex and I were a team, or so I thought. But that dinner? It was a slap in the face, a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Back at the house, I packed my bags in record time, each folded shirt a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. It wasn't just about leaving a place, it was about leaving a relationship that had shown its true colors. I turned off my phone, cutting off the barrage of messages. The silence was eerie, but welcome. That night wasn't just the end of a disastrous dinner, it was the close of a chapter one had no interest in revisiting. After the disaster that was Judy's birthday dinner, I found myself driving to my parents' house. The night was quiet, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. By the time I pulled up to their driveway, my decision was made. I needed sanctuary, yes, but more than that, I needed advice, something only my dad could offer. Walking into the house, the familiarity of it all was both comforting and jarring. Mom was asleep, but Dad was up, sitting in his study, surrounded by papers that seemed less important the moment I stepped in. "Jessica? What are you doing here at this hour? Is everything okay?" He stood up, concern etching his face. I took a deep breath, the events of the evening pouring out of me in a flood. I told him about the dinner, about Alex and his parents, and how I felt like I'd been reduced to nothing but a source of income for them. Dad listened in silence, his expression hardening with every word. When I finished, he sighed, a sound that carried years of experience and a hint of sorrow. "Jessica, I saw this coming. I just hoped I was wrong," he finally said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "How could I have been so blind, Dad?" "I thought Alex. I thought we were different," I said, feeling the weight of my naivety. He walked over, putting an arm around my shoulders. "You wanted to see the best in him, in them. There's no fault in that. But people show their true colors in tough times. It's a hard lesson, but an important one." I nodded, the reality of his words sinking in. "But what do I do now? I can't go back there." "You'll stay here, for starters. As for the rest, we'll figure it out together," he assured me, his confidence a balm to my frayed nerves. Then, he shared something that took me by surprise. "You know, the company's situation isn't as dire as it seems. We're actually on the verge of a breakthrough." It was a strategic move, a way to weed out the opportunists. I stared at him, stunned. "So, you mean to say we're not broke?" He chuckled, a sound that was part relief, part amusement. "Far from it. But it was important to see who would stick around when the chips were down. Unfortunately, Alex and his family showed their true selves. The revelation was a lot to process. My anger towards Alex and his parents was now mixed with a sense of vindication. They had revealed their true motives, and in doing so, had freed me from a future of manipulation and deceit. "Dad, I don't know whether to be relieved or furious," I admitted, the emotions battling inside me. "Be both. It's okay. But remember, this experience has taught you something invaluable about people and their intentions. Use it, learn from it," he advised, his words grounding me. Walking up to Judy and Martin's house the next day felt like heading into the lion's den. I was ready for a showdown, but nothing could have prepared me for the cold reception I got. Alex was standing there, divorce papers in hand, with a look that could only be described as triumphant disdain. "Here you go. Let's get this over with," he said, practically shoving the papers at me. His parents were hovering behind, barely containing their glee. Finally getting rid of the freeloader, Judy snickered, and Martin nodded in agreement, a smug smile plastered across his face. Alex joined in. "Yes, turns out you're just an ordinary dummy without your daddy's money. Thought you'd cry, but guess what? We don't need a tearful mess around here." Their words stung, but not in the way they expected. I felt a bizarre mix of anger and liberation. I looked at the papers, then at them, and without a word, signed where I needed to. As I did, their smiles widened, thinking they'd won. But I had the last laugh. Pulling out a newspaper from my bag, I slapped it down on the table with more force than necessary. "Thought you might find this interesting," I said, my voice dripping with unrestrained satisfaction. The headline screamed about my dad's company making a monumental comeback, profits soaring higher than ever. Watching their faces drain of color was a sight I'd pay to see again. Judy and Martin's smugness vanished, replaced by shock, then desperation. Alex's arrogance crumbled, leaving him looking like a child who'd just lost his favorite toy. Judy suddenly switched gears, stepping towards me with arms wide open. "Oh, my sweet girl, it's all a big misunderstanding. Let's hug it out." Martin, ever the opportunist, chimed in. "Let's not rush things. Sit down, have a coffee, and we can talk this through." And Alex, oh, Alex, he was the picture of regret. "I was wrong, okay? We can fix this. I want to make everything right. Please." Their sudden change of heart was almost comical. Almost. I couldn't help but laugh, a deep, hearty sound that felt cleansing. "You three are something else, you know that? But here's a newsflash for you, I'm done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, and the so-called family that only values me for my bank account." I turned to leave, their protests and pleas fading into the background. They called after me, a mix of desperation and disbelief in their voices, but I didn't look back. Not this time. After the spectacle at Judy and Martin's house, I was done. Not just with them, but with the whole sorry saga that had become my life. I needed a fresh start, a clean slate. So, I took some time, holed up at my folks' place, getting my head and heart back in the game. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was out for coffee with Sarah, my ever-supportive friend who had been there through it all. "Girl, you look like a weight's been lifted," she commented, sipping her latte. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "You have no idea. It's like I can finally breathe again." Sarah leaned in, her expression turning serious. "So, what's next for you, Jess? You've got a clean slate now." I thought about it, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. Maybe I'll travel, pick up some of the charity work I had to put on hold. As for love," I paused, giving her a wry smile. "I think I'll give that a miss for a while. Just make sure you're doing what makes you happy, okay? You deserve it after all that drama," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Thanks, Sarah. That's the plan." Not long after that conversation, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages from Alex. He was pleading, saying he'd changed, that we could start over. His parents even got in on the act, sending messages filled with apologies and invitations to talk things over. Sitting in my room, phone in hand, I couldn't help but laugh. The sheer audacity was almost admirable. Almost. I typed out a response, one I'd been mulling over for days. "Alex, moving on means moving forward, not going back to what broke you. I wish you all the best, but this is where our paths end for good. Take care." Hitting send felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd been stuck in for too long. And just like that, I was ready to start writing a new one. The next few months were a blur of activity. I threw myself into my work, took up volunteering with a vengeance, and even booked a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Life was full, and for the first time in a long while, it was fulfilling too. One evening, sitting on a balcony overlooking a bustling street in a far-off city, I realized I'd found what I'd been searching for all along: peace. The drama, the heartache, the betrayal, it all seemed like a distant memory. My phone buzzed with a new message, but this time, it was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was from someone I'd met during my travels, someone who'd made me laugh and think in equal measure. "Hey, Jessica. How about dinner when you're back? No expectations, just food and good company." I stared at the message, a smile slowly spreading across my face. Maybe it was time to open my heart again, but on my terms, at my pace. Yes, I'd like that. I typed back, hitting send before I could second-guess myself. Looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. I had moved on, not just from Alex and his family, but from the person I was when I was with them. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.